Last week, we discussed the problematic world of age gap relationships in BL, and today we move on to our main discussion: queer anime, dubious consent, and the rise of purity culture. Now, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, this is not gonna be an easy video to stomach. In fact, as a survivor of SA, it was pretty difficult for me to even write. We are going to be getting into really intense and triggering topics, so if you have triggers around SA, R, grooming, and anything else consent violation-wise, please prioritize your mental health and skip this one if needed. Since the algorithm isn't a fan of me saying particular words, I have added spaces in the words. For example, the word will now sound like abuse. If you'd like to watch the uncensored version, which also is the extended cut, it is now up on my Patreon, which is linked up here in the description and pinned in the comments. I've got a lot more queer anime related videos coming up, including my next ranking anime series next month, so make sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss it. So with all that being said, let's buckle up and get into it. Even though SA is everywhere in anime, for some ungodly reason, it is ridiculously prevalent in queer anime. Now, I've thought long and hard about why it seems to be exacerbated, especially in BL and GL anime, but I keep drawing a blank. Some of the general consensus I've seen, at least with BL, is that since BL is a genre primarily written by women for women, it is a space for them to explore, especially when it comes to non-consensual kinks. That theory definitely checks out because it is so wildly popular with women. One of the reasons being is because it allows them to self-insert themselves into a story where there are few personal stakes since they don't directly relate to the character's gender. Now, this is a much deeper conversation that dives into the history of BL, why it was popularized, why it's a genre written by women for women, the problematic elements of all of that, but that is a whole other video essay entirely, so let me know if you'd like to see that. I have a lot of thoughts about it, especially as someone who is queer and trying to navigate those spaces, dodging fetishization left and right while also worrying that I'm contributing to it. I have tried my best to approach this video with caution and care, but there's always room for growth, and I am open to critiques on how to better navigate this incredibly delicate topic. Since this is so delicate and triggering, even with all of the care I've put into making this video, there's still a chance that I might f it up here and there. This is such an important conversation and one that I want to see continue. So if there are areas that I'm falling short in or ways I should approach things differently, please let me know. SA is so widely prevalent in anime as a whole that it has desensitized us to the point that it can be hard to even pinpoint when it's happening, especially when said anime frames it as a quirky or comical tool and just, kind of fan service in general. It is even more nefarious when it's used as a tool to romantically push characters together into a relationship. The most dangerous component of haphazardly portraying SA without care is that it normalizes these assaults both in anime and out in the real world. Here are just a few examples of some of the more subtle acts that are actually SA but are swept under the rug in anime. So pretty much the bulk of fan service that involves physical contact, be it groping, touching, or being touchy-feely in general to the point that the character is uncomfortable. Tearing somebody's clothes off or having their clothes fly off their body without their consent is also SA. It's important to remember that much of SA results from a consistent buildup of sexual harassment. This harassment can range anywhere from asking inappropriate questions to commenting on one's appearance to full-on stalking. The main form of SA that people usually think about when it comes to the subject is full-on intimate violations, ranging from kissing to touching to full-on R-word. Dakaichi is a perfect example of what happens when an abuser coerces and continues to push past their victim's boundaries until their victim gives in. From the start, Junta is obsessed with Takato and quickly makes things sexual with him, even engaging in intimacy in the very first episode. The anime tamed it way down, but in the manga, he just full-on R-words Takato. After this interaction, he stays as close as possible to him, continuing to love bomb and coerce him into giving him a chance. This includes SAing him on a number of occasions, including in public. By constantly not taking no for an answer and continuing to pressure him, Takato eventually gives up fighting and starts a relationship with him. Was this because he genuinely liked Junta, or was it because he was worn down and exhausted and it was just easier to give in? Dakaichi being framed as a sexy romance is what makes this series so dangerous, because it frames all of these assaults as a quirky component to their courtship and a plot device to make the two closer. Junta faces little to no consequences for assaulting and R-wording Takato, and is instead rewarded by starting a relationship with his victim. A similar but less intense example is the brand new show, There's No Freaking Way I'll Be Your Lover, Unless, where Reneko is being pursued by Mai. Reneko just wants Mai to be her best friend, but after Mai falls in love with her, she insists that they need to be in a relationship. So in true anime fashion, they try to do both and switch off the days. On the days that they're in a relationship, despite Reneko making it very clear that she does not want to engage romantically, Mai SAs her through kissing, forces herself on her physically, and even tries to R-word her, which thankfully is interrupted before it could cross that line. The most disgusting part is when in episode 2, after coercing Reneko into taking a bath with her and then SAing her during the bath, Mai jokes afterward about how if this was a week earlier, she would have gone even harder, implying that she would have just straight up R-worded her. She then goes out of her way to minimize what she's done and attempts to manipulate Reneko into believing that it wasn't even that bad and that Reneko actually liked it. After nearly R-wording her in the very next episode, she goes full, "Woe is me, I'm too broken and harmful, you shouldn't be around me," and guilts Reneko into being the one to apologize. She herself never even really apologizes, but she has no problem with Reneko apologizing and being the one to pursue the relationship from there. Continuing on with the toxic essay-riddled Yuri slop, we run into the reigning champion of toxic essay, Citrus. I tried so hard to go into this anime with an open mind, like maybe it wasn't as bad as all the horrible things I'd heard about. But no, Yuzu is publicly SA'd by Mei in the very first episode, and then SA'd in a much more violent manner when they get home. Because not only is this an SA wasteland, it's also pseudo-incest since they're stepsisters. After SA'ing her pretty consistently the first few episodes, she pulls back and suddenly grows a moral backbone, claiming that they just can't do this anymore. But through the magic of SA, Yuzu's sexuality is awakened, and now she is the one to start pursuing Mei. Citrus is the perfect amalgamation of the most toxic tropes that I hate the most. We've got 1. Step-siblings who fall in love. 2. Sexuality blooming from constant SA. 3. The predator is given a super tragic backstory which magically excuses all of the constant assault they've been heaping on their victim. And 4. It's all wrapped up in a nice tidy bow and the predator never takes accountability and their victim becomes the one who has to apologize and change everything about themselves so they can be worthy of dating their abuser. Can you tell I fucking hate this anime? One of the examples of coercion I continuously see being ignored and swept under the rug is the absolute shit show in Bloom Into You. Yu continuously tells Toko that she does not want a relationship, and at first, Toko respects her boundaries, but as the show goes on, she starts pushing past those boundaries. Despite saying that she's fine with Yu taking as long as she needs, she constantly is bringing it up, constantly pressuring Yu into making a decision, and worst of all, she physically forces herself on Yu during the sports festival episode, forcing kisses on her then, as well as several times throughout the series. She doesn't actually respect Yu or her boundaries, because if she did, she would stop when Yu continuously tells her that she was not comfortable with her actions. By the end of the series, they get together, which makes me beg the question, did you actually genuinely like her, or was she just worn down through coercion and thus developed feelings for her? Bloom Into You continues to perpetuate the dangerous message that if you like someone enough, just keep pressuring them until they give in to you. Doesn't matter if they fall under the aromantic or asexual spectrum, just keep pushing your desires onto them and eventually they will come around. People also forget that once someone is unable to consent due to influence of substances, diminished capacity, or some forms of intellectual and physical disability, that is SA. As soon as someone is unable to consent, it becomes assault. When there's a toxic age gap consisting of an adult preying on a minor, we fall into a similar situation. Legally, minors cannot consent, so legally, it is automatically a violation. As soon as an adult engages in sexual activities with minors under the age of consent, it is automatically statutory R-word. Even if the minor is the age of consent, if they're still not legally an adult, it's still statutory. This is what makes anime like Super Lovers, Loveless, Hitorajime My Hero, and Junja Romantica so dangerous. I dive much deeper into those relationships in my age gap video, so if you'd like to hear my full thoughts on those relationships, watch that. The main component in terms of SA that is constantly weaponized in all of these anime is that these minors are trapped in various situations with their abusers where SA is forced onto them. In Super Lovers and Junja Romantica, they live with their abuser. So saying no can result in them losing their home, their support, and being abandoned. Ren from Super Lovers has been abandoned and abused so much of his life. So when his guardian and savior Haru starts forcing intimacy, despite him literally fighting back, he slowly starts giving in more and more. And the question really becomes, is he starting to be okay with intimacy because he actually wants it? Or is it because he doesn't want his guardian to abandon him? Instead of supporting him like a guardian should and respecting his boundaries, Haru consistently pushes past them to satisfy his own sexual desires. In Junja Romantica, Misaki literally doesn't have anywhere else to live, so when he's essayed by his new guardian landlord person during their first interaction, he quickly learns that in order to survive, he needs to tiptoe around him. Otherwise, Usami will use SA in retaliation. Joke's on him though, cause Usami couldn't care less about how good Misaki acts, or how much he helps him. He is going to SA Misaki whenever he feels like it. Even years later, when they're in an established relationship, Misaki still has to tiptoe around Usami. In Hitorajime My Hero, SA is used as a tool that Kosuke wields to control Masahiro into keeping his silence and making sure he adheres to the guidelines of his ideal relationship. This extends to blackmailing Masahiro with the threat of SA when they're at school, where Kosuke is literally his teacher. SA and forced intimacy, especially when Masahiro isn't ready for those steps, is a way that Kosuke is able to mold Masahiro into his ideal partner. And through these acts, he is able to set up parameters for control. In Loveless, Sobi perpetuates the very cycle of abuse he himself was subjected to as a child and repeats the cycle with 12-year-old Ritsuka. Using the very convenient power system which requires a kiss to seal a bond, he is able to easily force intimacy on Ritsuka, which continues to escalate throughout the entirety of the series. One of the grayest areas of consent that people constantly overlook is the simple fact that as soon as someone revokes consent, it becomes assault. In Yes, No, or Maybe, our couple finally confesses to each other and starts getting intimate. At first, it's consensual. Everyone is happy and enjoying themselves. But Kei quickly gets overwhelmed and uncomfortable. He tells Ushio to wait, but Ushio pushes past that and continues going. Kei gets more and more upset and demands that the act stops, but Ushio continues and ends up R-wording him. This is played off as he was only saying no, but he doesn't really mean it, which is one of the most dangerous messages you can put out into the world. The fact of the matter is, as soon as someone revokes consent and tells you to stop, if you continue, you are assaulting them, and that assault can quickly graduate to R-word. It doesn't matter if they said yes up until then, or if they said yes in the past. As soon as they say no and you continue, that is assault. By the end of this interaction, Kei is upset, but is pacified by Ushio, who love bombs him into moving forward with little to no consequence. When it comes to SA, there are few things I hate more than when it infects an otherwise fantastic series and drags it down into the muck. That is exactly what happens with Given between Akihiko and Haruki. The first strike against the couple is the flagrant lack of chemistry between these two. It really felt like them being together was just to, throw a second gay couple into the mix for Yaoi's sake. Haruki is and has been head over heels in love with Akihiko, who quickly learns of this and uses it to his advantage. Being a deeply flawed character who has refused to heal any of his past traumas, he simply uses Haruki for his own whims, which escalates into him SAing him. Somehow Haruki is able to move past this, and the two start a relationship which had both me and my bestie screaming at the screen. Just because someone apologizes does not mean they suddenly get a free pass or that they've done the work to truly heal themselves. Especially if someone inflicts violence on you like this, they need to do serious work on themselves, ideally with professional help to help heal themselves before they move on to starting a relationship. Haruki is thrust into the position of Akihiko's fixer, who is now somehow gonna just magically heal him through the power of love or something. I literally hate all of this. After listening to me rant about all of these anime, you might think that I just don't approve of SA and murky consent being represented in anime point blank period. But I don't think it's something we should just remove in its entirety from anime. I think completely ignoring its presence, its effects, and the violence it causes does a great disservice to society. After all, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience SA in their lifetime. Acting like it doesn't happen is not only inaccurate, but it isolates victims and heightens stigma around SA, which can make it even harder for victims to come forward. So, if there's obviously a bad way to depict SA as seen in all of these previous entries, is there a right way to include it in anime? I personally believe that there is. People are going to disagree across the board as to what the right and wrong way to depict it is. For me personally, I think that when it's depicted, it should be depicted as negative. By negative, I mean it should not be used as a tool to romantically push characters together. I don't think it should be used as a cute or comical quirk either. And we should also minimize the ways that it's used for torture porn as a mean to make a character stronger. I want to see SA treated as the abhorrent act that it is, and not swept under the rug or minimized. I also want to see the survivors front and center. When the perpetrator is featured, I do not want the writing to make me feel sympathetic towards the violence they inflicted. They do not deserve a redemption arc, especially when it involves their victims having to forgive them. I would prefer to see the survivor's healing or lack of healing journey front and center. This is such a tricky topic that needs to be treated with the utmost care. So, are there any anime out there that are able to pull this off? Here are a few that I have personally been satisfied with their depictions. Are they perfect? No, but they are much more honest in their stories, especially when it comes to the brutal reality of what SA and surviving SA can look like. In our first entry, Twittering Birds Never Fly, both main characters have dealt with or witnessed violent SA in their life, and it has transformed them in drastically different ways. After Yashiro was violently SA'd in his teenage years, he becomes extremely hypersexual, which deeply affects his teenage and adult life. This is actually much more common in the real world than you would think. It happens for a multitude of reasons, but for Yashiro, he drowns himself in impulsive and sometimes risky sexual interactions as a way to reclaim his power. He lets this consume him for years, and only somewhat starts to find stability in his later adult life. His bodyguard Domeki had the opposite reaction to the SA he was exposed to. Years before, he caught his father R-wording his adopted sister and nearly beat his father to death in response, landing him in jail and causing him to lose his job as a police officer. With limited career options post-prison, he joins the Yakuza and becomes Yashiro's bodyguard. Because of the trauma of this situation, he has become impotent and has not yet recovered from the psychological damage of witnessing such a disturbing scene. Being on opposite ends of hypo and hypersexuality, the two develop a very unique relationship with each other. Yashiro strives to conquer Domeki and fix him of his impotence, while Domeki engages with Yashiro but is still not able to overcome his psychological problems. Slowly, the two are able to understand each other, and as they learn and grow, they start exploring what possible healing could look like. I was very impressed with how this anime showed two very different realistic outcomes of experiencing SA and how that can shape one's sexuality even years later. Speaking of how SA can radically shape someone, it is finally time to talk about Banana Fish. I'm not going to get into ending spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, don't worry about this ruining the series for you. Ash is someone who suffered some of the worst atrocities a child could ever be subjected to. We're talking being trafficked and pimped out to powerful adults as a child for years. After escaping, this trauma has informed every aspect of his life. His eyes are now locked onto justice and vengeance against the monsters who inflicted this against him. This sends him down a path of death, destruction, and gang violence in New York City. By the time the anime starts, he has been locked into this survival vengeance for years. And it's only after he meets Eiji that he's finally able to start letting down some of those walls. His story shows the cycle of violence that many survivors get locked into in order to survive. Without outside help and resources, it is all too easy to get roped into compromising situations and lifestyles. I thought Banana Fish did a really wonderful job at breaking down the facade we assume when thinking about crime and how people become criminals. How so much of it, if not all of it, stems from a combination of deep-seated trauma, complete lack of resources, and a system that is set in place to keep people locked in a cycle of poverty and crime. Add dealing with severe SA, and you have the perfect storm that is Ash. The way they handled his story was so beautifully done, especially with how they slowly peeled back the layers of how this trauma has shaped him as a person. It is raw, honest, and absolutely devastating. So much so that I don't think I can ever rewatch it. One of my biggest complaints about anime like Hitorijime My Hero is that they glorify these student-teacher relationships and completely gloss over the very real damage they inflict. That is why I was so pleasantly surprised by how well Twilight Out of Focus was able to handle that same subject. Hisashi was SA'd by his stepsister growing up, who, when they were caught, he was the one who was blamed and kicked out of the house for the incident. Having nowhere to go and no one to turn to, he was in the perfect position for someone like his teacher to come in and be his savior. It is now years later, and what started as a seemingly romantic and enjoyable relationship has been hit with a harsh dose of reality. Hisashi is miserable, but his teacher keeps him in the relationship by weaponizing the taboo to ensure Hisashi's silence. He uses the threat that if they're exposed, it will not only ruin the teacher's professional life, but it will also make Hisashi a social pariah. When Hisashi goes to school, he is able to finally start creating some distance from his teacher by moving into the dorms. But then something happens. Hisashi falls in love with his roommate Mao. He's able to understand what real love feels like and is able to muster up the courage to finally end the relationship with his teacher. Of course, this is not an easy feat, and he is assaulted as a result. But he is finally free and feels comfortable enough to share his story with Mao. This is not a smooth transition though, and there's an incident that indicates that trauma is very much still in the driver's seat. During their first year before he breaks up with his teacher, there is an incident where he completely loses control of his body, dissociating to the point that he's not even aware of his actions until after Mao is able to physically snap him out of it. But during this incident, he starts to SA Mao. This just goes to show how easy it is to re-engage in these cycles if you have not been able to do the work to heal your trauma. Unlike so many others in this video, Hisashi immediately apologizes profusely and repeatedly throughout the year. He does the work to heal himself. So when him and Mao do eventually get together the following year, after he breaks up with his teacher, the two are truly able to move forward together. And finally, we have Revolutionary Girl Utena, which has one of the most powerful and avant-garde depictions of how SA can traumatize people. This is one of those surrealist anime that you have to watch a multitude of times before you understand that all of these grand duels and magical out-of-this-world experiences are actually the inner workings of the main character's psyche. They are not actually going through these massive world-ending situations. This is just how their brains have decided to cope with the SA and abuse that they're experiencing. Anthy has been abused and deeply traumatized by her brother Akio for years and has become a shell of a person because of it. Utena is introduced into her world and starts being groomed by her brother as well. One of the most horrifying scenes in the entire anime is one that if you don't know what to look for, you'll miss. It is an R-word scene, but one that doesn't look anything like what you'd think an R-word would look like. Now, this next part is gonna get intense, so feel free to skip to this timestamp if you don't want any further details on the act. During the act, Utena isn't screaming. She isn't fighting back. She's just talking calmly about different things that she wants to do later that night. She keeps nervously talking, and you realize that she's dissociating so hard by thinking of literally anything other than the horrific act that's being inflicted against her. The scene never even shows Akio. People always think our word looks one particular way, but completely forget about the large amount of people who simply dissociate to try to distract themselves throughout the act in order to protect themselves and try to speed up time to get themselves to the end. What makes this representation so powerful is that it's solely focused on Utena. The masterful and horrifying characterization of Akio throughout the show as this beautiful prince-like character who everyone looks up to and wants to date, actually being this horrific monster hidden behind his kind words, was done so well. Revolutionary Girl Utena was a harsh reminder that there are so many abusers out there who are attractive, well-liked, socially adept, and on the outside, the perfect package. So it is more important than ever to learn the red flags and learn how to stand up and fight back. When it comes down to abusers and SA in anime, I think the most important component will always come back down to how can we portray these very real-life situations in a way that doesn't sweep them under the rug, but also doesn't romanticize them. It will always be a very tricky line, and one that will constantly need updates and revisions. Are there any anime that you have personally seen that were able to explore these topics in a way that you felt like was done right? I would love to hear more of y'all's thoughts, because everyone has a different expectation for how these difficult topics should be explored in anime. And now for the big kicker of this video essay series. Is me lasering in on difficult topics involving SA, toxic age gaps, minor endangerment, and abusive tactics in anime doing a disservice to these topics? Are my judgments casting blanket statements over all of these topics, meaning including them in anime is problematic, aka the anime is problematic, aka the anime is bad? By flagging difficult topics as problematic, am I demonizing them to the point that I'm promoting puritanical ideologies and engaging in purity culture? Now, I'm not gonna lie, being accused of engaging in purity culture makes me want to rip my hair out, because are you fucking serious? I am one of the biggest opponents to purity culture. It is a horrific ideology that demonizes the LGBTQ community, keeps girls and women trapped in fear under the patriarchy, and harms everyone across the board. It is one of the leading driving forces in the conservative movement and is actively helping fascism and alt-right movements succeed around the world. So I'm obviously not consciously participating in purity culture, but are any of my arguments unconsciously touching on elements of purity culture? The one that keeps me awake at night is the argument, think of the children, which unfortunately does cross into both my and the purity culture arguments. They're both rooted in protecting children from predators. However, in purity culture, predators are predators simply because they're LGBT or somehow subversive to conservative ideologies. My argument for protect the children comes from witnessing both in media and in my own life. The sometimes lifelong damage that occurs to minors when they are preyed on by adults, especially the damage that occurs due to toxic age gaps, abuse, and SA. It truly does hurt my soul to think that since both of our arguments are centered around think of the children, that my stance could be connected to theirs. So I've continued to examine and re-examine my stances to see what's truly behind them. It deeply upsets me that with the very real rise of purity culture, especially in fandom spaces, simply calling out problematic elements in anime can get you lumped in with purity culture. Since purity culture is quickly rising in all aspects of our daily lives, I think we have to be even more careful at sorting out what's based in hatred and what's based in fact-based reality. For example, labeling all LGBTQ anime as predatory, dangerous, and pushing an agenda simply for being LGBTQ is based in bigotry and prejudice. While on the other hand, calling out SA as a tool to romantically push a couple together as dangerous because it normalizes SA, which can and has put real people in danger, can be factually backed and is based in reality. Now, not all things are going to be as black and white as those two examples, and it's our job to search through the gray and continue to investigate where our strong feelings about these topics are coming from. Even the best of us can be radicalized and sent down extremist rabbit holes, especially in this day and age where algorithms can quickly reshape your opinions on any and everything. It is incredibly important to be able to take a beat, stand back, look at a statement, an argument, and do your own research on it. You are not a bad person for getting swept into purity culture and getting radicalized in one way or another. It is easier than ever for that to happen. But it is your responsibility to check yourself, learn to deconstruct from toxic ideologies, and find an exit route. It is also your responsibility to take ownership for any pain you have caused and apologize to anyone you have hurt. When all else fails, lean on your community to help you. Be vulnerable, admit your shortcomings, and find resources to help you get out. So at the end of the day, is it really that deep? Like, are we really taking a video essay about SA and somehow ending up discussing how to deconstruct from toxic ideologies? Yes, because we are in a very precarious point in history where democracy is under attack from fascism, and most of this fascism is fueled by alt-right hateful ideologies, which can be traced back to some form of purity culture. Especially in the LGBTQ community, part of protecting ourselves and our community from the powers trying to erase our existence is helping each other, especially those who have slipped under, to deconstruct and come back from the brink of extremism. This is not to say that those who have caused harm by weaponizing hate get a free pass. Consequences and accountability need and should happen in order for rehabilitation to be effective. And unfortunately, there are going to be some exceptions out there who are too far gone to be saved. I am focusing on those who we can still make a difference with to help pull back before they've crossed the point of no return. I am not talking about Nazis or other hate groups, so do not try to get it twisted. It starts with us checking in on our community, seeing where people are at, engaging if help and intervention need to happen. We are definitely at a tipping point where we need to band together in order to take down fascism. They have been incredibly successful at inciting infighting and dividing us, so it is our job to pull back together, stand up, and fight back, while we still have the freedom of speech and right to do so. So to wrap things up, wow, yeah, that was a lot. I honestly didn't expect to get this emotional writing and crafting this video, but all these topics are just so important for us to discuss in this community, in this point in history. The more we can continue to have conversations like this, the more we can learn how to support, come together, and fight back. Just like in the last video, I want to offer these same resources. If you or someone you know has experienced SA, sexual violence, grooming, or abuse, here are some resources to reach out to. They are completely anonymous and can help connect you with the help that you deserve. If you are in an abusive relationship, please proceed with caution in a way that won't put your safety at risk. I've also linked all the resources in the description for easy access. I've said it before and I'll say it again. No matter what your abuser or anyone has ever told you, this is not your fault. This was never your fault, and you deserve love and healing. I had to censor so much of this video and cut a lot down for time. So if you'd like to watch the extended, uncensored cut, it is now up on my Patreon, which is linked in the description and pinned in the comments. Shout out to all of my Patreon producers, including Sakura Sky, Karen Miriam Goldberg, Jeff Friend, Horsey Bread, and a special shout out to Legion Zero. Next video, we are going to be doing a breakdown of all the anime I watched this summer season. And yes, we will finally get to talk about the summer Hikaru died, because I am batshit obsessed and I have a lot of thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. Thank y'all so much for sticking around, and I'll see all of y'all on the next one.